the night shift. The fluorescent lights in the subway tunnel flickered overhead as Alex made his final rounds. As the lone late-night maintenance worker, he was responsible for ensuring the trains ran smoothly and the stations were spotless before the start of the next day's service. It was past 2 a.m. and the station was eerily quiet. Alex's footsteps echoed off the tiled walls as he walked the empty platform, double-checking that no trash or debris had been left behind. Satisfied that everything was in order, he made his way to the end of the platform and peered down the dark tunnel. The last train of the night was just pulling in, its bright headlights piercing the gloom. Alex watched as the sleek silver carriages glided to a stop, the doors hissing open. He stepped aboard, ready to perform his final task, a thorough inspection of the train before sending it back to the depot. As he walked through the empty cars, Alex couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The air felt thick and stale, and the lights seemed dimmer than usual. He quickened his pace, eager to complete his work and head home. Reaching the front of the train, Alex performed a final check of the controls and systems. Everything appeared to be functioning normally. Satisfied, he made his way back through the cars, heading for the exit. But as he approached the platform, he noticed something was wrong. The doors remained firmly shut, refusing to open no matter how hard he pushed and pulled. Alex's heart began to race as a horrible realization dawned on him: he was trapped. Alex pressed the emergency intercom button, but there was only silence. The train seemed to have lost all power, leaving him stranded and alone in the dark, motionless carriage. Panic began to set in as he tried in vain to pry open the doors. He shouted for help, his cries echoing endlessly down the empty tunnel. But there was no response, no sign that anyone could hear him. Exhausted, Alex sank into one of the seats, trying to slow his racing heart. He knew that the maintenance team would eventually come looking for him when he didn't report in, but how long would that take? And what if something had happened to them as well? As the minutes ticked by, the air in the carriage began to feel thick and stale. Alex's breathing grew labored, and he felt a tightness in his chest. Was the ventilation system failing, or was there some other, more sinister reason for the lack of airflow? Desperate, he searched the train for any sign of a way out, but found nothing. The windows were sealed tight, and there was no access to the tracks or the tunnel beyond. He was truly trapped, with no means of escape. Exhaustion and fear began to overwhelm him, and Alex felt his consciousness slipping away. As the world grew dark around him, he wondered if anyone would ever find him. Alex awoke with a start, gasping for air. The first thing he noticed was the dim, flickering light filtering in through the windows. Then came the acrid smell of something burning. Disoriented, he looked around the carriage, trying to get his bearings. The doors were still stubbornly shut, but something else had changed. The air was thick and hazy, making it difficult to breathe. Coughing, Alex stumbled to his feet and made his way towards the front of the train. As he drew closer, he saw a faint glow coming from the control panel. Smoke was billowing from one of the consoles, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. Realizing that the train had somehow caught fire, Alex's heart raced. He needed to get out, and fast. But the doors remained firmly sealed, trapping him inside the rapidly heating carriage. Panic-stricken, he began to pound on the windows, desperate to attract the attention of anyone who might be able to help. But the station was silent and still, with no sign of life. As the smoke grew thicker and the heat more intense, Alex felt his strength beginning to fade. His lungs burned with each breath, and his vision grew blurry. Collapsing back into the seat, he wondered if this was how it would all end, trapped and alone, slowly suffocating in the darkness. Just as Alex felt consciousness slipping away, a faint sound reached his ears, the distant rumble of an approaching train. Summoning the last of his strength, he staggered to the front of the carriage and pressed his face against the window, desperate to catch a glimpse of the incoming train. Sure enough, a bright light could be seen piercing the gloom of the tunnel. Alex pounded on the glass, waving his arms frantically, praying that the driver would see him. But the train continued to barrel forward, showing no signs of slowing. As it drew closer, Alex could make out the familiar logo of the metro system. This was no rogue train, it was the first service of the morning, arriving right on schedule. Relief flooded through him, quickly replaced by a new wave of panic. What if the driver didn't see him in time? The train was now just seconds away, its deafening horn blaring through the tunnel. Alex braced himself, certain that he was about to be crushed. But at the last moment, the driver slammed on the brakes, the wheels screeching as the train came to a shuddering halt just a few feet from the stricken carriage. Dizzy and disoriented, Alex stumbled out onto the platform, gasping for fresh air. A crowd of concerned passengers had already gathered, and he was quickly surrounded by a team of metro staff. "What happened?" "Are you all right?" one of them asked, eyes wide with concern. Alex tried to speak, but his voice came out as a hoarse croak. Trapped fire, he managed, before collapsing into the arms of the waiting crew. Alex awoke in a brightly lit hospital room, the familiar beeping of medical equipment filling the air. As his eyes slowly adjusted, he recognized the concerned faces of his colleagues, all gathered around his bedside. "Welcome back," said the metro manager, a relieved smile spreading across his face. "You had us worried there for a while." Alex tried to speak, but his throat felt raw and painful. The manager quickly poured him a glass of water, which he gratefully accepted. "What happened?" Alex croaked, the events of the previous night slowly coming back to him. The manager's expression turned serious. "We're not entirely sure," he admitted. "When the first train of the morning couldn't get through, the driver radioed it in. We dispatched a team to investigate, and that's when they found you." He paused, shaking his head. The carriage was filled with smoke, but thankfully the fire hadn't spread too far. "You were unconscious, but otherwise unharmed." Alex felt a wave of relief wash over him. "How long have I been out?" "Just a few hours," the manager replied. "The doctors say you should make a full recovery. You're one lucky man, Alex." Alex nodded, his mind still reeling from the ordeal. As his colleagues continued to fuss over him, he couldn't help but wonder what had caused the fire and how close he had come to not making it out alive. But for now, all that mattered was that he was safe, thanks to the quick actions of the metro crew. As he settled back into the hospital bed, Alex felt a renewed sense of gratitude for the team that had risked their own lives to save his. The incident had been a harrowing experience, but it had also served as a reminder of the importance of the work they did and the dedication of the people who kept the city's lifeblood, the subway system, running smoothly day and night. As he drifted off to sleep, Alex knew that he would never take his job for granted again, and he vowed to always be vigilant, ready to face whatever challenges the night shift might bring. The descent into madness. Jake yawned as he boarded the late-night subway train, eager to get home after a long day at work. The carriage was mostly empty, save for a few weary commuters. As the train rumbled through the dark tunnels, Jake felt his eyelids grow heavy. Before he knew it, he had drifted off to sleep. When Jake finally stirred, a chill ran down his spine. The train had stopped, and the carriage was pitch black. Panic seized him as he realized he was utterly alone. He fumbled for his phone, but the screen remained dark, no signal. Steeling his nerves, Jake peered out the window into the inky blackness. There was no sign of the platform, just an endless void. His heart pounding, he tried the door, but it was locked fast. Trapped. Jake's mind raced as he searched for a way out. In a moment of desperation, he pried open the door and stepped out onto the tracks. The beam of his phone's dying flashlight cast eerie shadows along the tunnel walls. "Hello," Jake called out, his voice echoing endlessly. No response. With a deep breath, he began to walk, following the tracks in search of an exit. The air was thick and stale, and the darkness seemed to press in around him. The tunnel stretched on, twisting and turning, with no end in sight. As time passed, Jake's sense of direction became hopelessly disoriented. The tunnels felt like a labyrinth, and the relentless silence was driving him to the brink of madness. The faint light of his phone flickered and died, plunging him into absolute darkness. Panic gripped Jake as he was enveloped in blackness. He stumbled blindly, hands outstretched, searching for a wall or a door, anything to guide him. But there was nothing, just an endless void. Suddenly, a faint sound reached his ears, a distant, unearthly screeching. Jake froze, his breath caught in his throat. The sound grew louder, echoing through the tunnels, sending shivers down his spine. Driven by pure terror, Jake began to run, his footsteps echoing frantically. He ran until his lungs burned, but the tunnels seemed to stretch on forever. The screeching grew closer, its otherworldly pitch piercing his mind. Exhausted, Jake collapsed against the tunnel wall, trembling. In the darkness, he could feel the presence of something ancient and malevolent, watching him, waiting. Time seemed to lose all meaning as Jake huddled in the darkness, his senses overwhelmed by the oppressive silence and the ever-present threat of the unknown. The screeching had faded, but the sense of dread remained, a palpable weight pressing down on him. Jake's mind raced, grasping for any shred of hope, any way to escape this nightmare. But the tunnels seemed to stretch on endlessly, a vast, labyrinthine abyss that swallowed all light and sound. As he sat there, shivering, Jake began to hear other sounds: the faint scuttling of unseen creatures, the distant rumble of trains, and the occasional eerie moan that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. The darkness was alive, teeming with unknown horrors. Driven to the brink of madness, Jake knew he had to keep moving, to find a way out before the darkness claimed him forever. With a shuddering breath, he rose and pressed on, his only companion the faint echo of his own footsteps. Jake's legs ached, his mind reeling, as he stumbled through the endless tunnels. The darkness had become a tangible force, pressing in on him, suffocating him. He could feel the weight of it, the oppressive silence, the ever-present sense of being watched. But then, in the distance, a glimmer of hope, the faint sound of a train. Jake quickened his pace, driven by a desperate need to reach the platform, to escape this nightmare. The sound grew louder, the light of the approaching train casting long shadows along the tunnel walls. As the train roared past, Jake pressed himself against the tunnel wall, his heart pounding. The gale-force winds of the passing train whipped his hair, and for a fleeting moment he was bathed in the blinding light. Then, just as quickly, the train vanished, leaving him once more in the oppressive darkness. Mustering his courage, Jake pressed on, his steps quickening with a renewed sense of purpose. He could feel the tunnel opening up, the air growing fresher, and in the distance, a faint glimmer of light. Hope surged within him, and he broke into a desperate sprint, his ragged breaths echoing through the cavernous space. Finally, he emerged onto the platform, staggering and disoriented. The fluorescent lights were a welcome sight, and the sound of voices and the bustle of commuters filled him with a profound sense of relief. He had escaped the abyss. Or had he? As Jake made his way towards the exit, a strange unease settled over him. The other passengers seemed oblivious, hurrying to their destinations, but Jake could not shake the feeling that something was deeply, terribly wrong. The air felt charged, the lights too bright, the sounds too muted and distant. And then, as he neared the turnstiles, he caught a glimpse of something in the shadows, a movement, a presence, something that should not be. Jake froze, his heart pounding, as a realization dawned on him. He had not escaped the darkness at all. The darkness had followed him, clinging to him, seeping into the very fabric of this world. And now, as he stood on the threshold of the surface, he knew that he would never be free, that the abyss had claimed him, body and soul. Jake's mind raced, his senses overwhelmed by the growing sense of dread. The platform, once a beacon of safety, now felt like a trap, a false haven that concealed a far more sinister reality. As he stood there, paralyzed by fear, the shadows seemed to shift and writhe, as if alive. The other passengers, oblivious to the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil, continued their hurried routines, their faces blank and vacant. Slowly, reluctantly, Jake turned to face the tunnel from which he had emerged, his gaze drawn to the inky blackness that seemed to beckon him, to whisper promises of knowledge and power that no mortal mind should ever know. In that moment, Jake knew that he had a choice: to cling to the illusion of safety, to try and escape this nightmare, or to embrace the abyss, to descend once more into the depths of the unknown. The decision, he realized, had been made the moment he had stepped onto the tracks, the moment he had dared to challenge the ancient forces that lurked in the darkness. With a resigned sigh, Jake turned his back on the platform and stepped back into the tunnel, his footsteps echoing through the endless labyrinth. The darkness enveloped him, a cold embrace that promised to reveal the true nature of the universe, a truth so profound and terrifying that it would forever shatter his fragile grip on reality. And as he descended, Jake knew that he would never return, that he had become one with the abyss, a willing sacrifice to the unknowable horrors that dwelled in the depths of the earth. The Crumbling Depths. The stale air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and rust as Ivan and Dmitri descended into the service tunnel. The dim glow of their headlamps barely pierced the oppressive darkness that seemed to cling to the walls like a living entity. Their footsteps echoed through the tunnel, a rhythmic counterpoint to the drip, drip, drip of water somewhere in the unseen distance. Ivan, a veteran of the metro system, moved with a practiced ease, his hand trailing along the rough-hewn tunnel wall. Dmitri, new to the job, followed close behind, his eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. They were on a routine inspection of the tracks, a mundane task that had suddenly taken on a sinister air in the suffocating darkness. How much further? Ivan Dmitri's voice echoed strangely in the confined space. Not far now, Ivan replied, his voice gruff but reassuring. Just past this bend, we should reach the section they were concerned about. As they rounded the corner, the air grew noticeably colder, carrying with it a faint metallic tang. The tunnel walls, usually lined with concrete, were now bare rock, slick with moisture. Dmitri shivered, pulling his worn jacket tighter around himself. Suddenly, the world plunged into absolute darkness. The headlamps, their only source of light, flickered and died, leaving them enveloped in an impenetrable blackness. What happened? Dmitri's voice was tight with panic. Calm down, Ivan said, his voice betraying a hint of his own unease. Must be a power surge. We should have backup lights in our packs. Fumbling in the darkness, they located their emergency lights, the weak beams doing little to dispel the oppressive gloom. The tunnel seemed to press in on them, the silence broken only by their ragged breathing and the frantic thudding of their hearts. With their limited light, Ivan and Dmitri cautiously continued along the tunnel, their progress slow and hesitant. The air grew colder, the metallic scent stronger. The walls, once familiar, now seemed alien, their contours distorted by shadows that danced in the weak beams of their lights. Ivan, are you sure we're going the right way? Dmitri's voice trembled. This doesn't look like any section one's seen before. Ivan frowned, a knot of unease forming in his gut. Dmitri was right. The tunnel was unfamiliar, the air thick with a sense of decay and neglect. The rhythmic drip, drip, drip of water had become a steady stream, flowing from somewhere deeper within the darkness. We must have taken a wrong turn somewhere, Ivan admitted, his voice grim. But don't worry, we'll find our way back. They pressed on, their hope dwindling with each step. The tunnel seemed to twist and turn endlessly, a labyrinthine maze designed to trap them in its depths. The silence was broken by a new sound, a low, grinding noise that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Dmitri stopped, his face pale with fear. What was that? Ivan strained his ears, the hair on the back of his neck prickling. The grinding sound grew louder, accompanied by a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the soles of their boots. I don't know, Ivan whispered, his voice tight with fear. But we need to get out of here. They turned back, retracing their steps as best they could in the confusing darkness. The grinding noise followed them, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. Panic gnawed at the edges of their minds, urging them to run, to escape the oppressive darkness and the terrifying sounds that pursued them. Suddenly, a faint glimmer of light appeared in the distance, a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. With renewed energy, they stumbled towards it, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and relief. As they approached the light, the tunnel widened, opening into a vast cavern. The source of the light became clear, a single, bare bulb hanging precariously from a crumbling ceiling. The grinding noise reached a crescendo, and they realized with horror that the source of the sound was above them. A massive chunk of concrete, dislodged from the ceiling, hung by a thread, threatening to fall at any moment. The beam of light from the bulb illuminated the danger, revealing a network of cracks that spiderwebbed across the ceiling, evidence of the tunnel's imminent collapse. They were standing in a section of the metro long abandoned, deemed unsafe and scheduled for demolition. They had stumbled into a death trap, saved only by the failing light that had revealed the danger above them. The enormity of their situation hit them like a physical blow. They were trapped in a condemned tunnel, beneath a ceiling that could collapse at any moment. The grinding and groaning of the concrete above them intensified, a constant reminder of the danger they were in. "We need to get out of here," now Ivan shouted, his voice echoing through the cavern. They turned and ran, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, littered with debris and rubble, making their escape even more treacherous. The single bulb, their only source of light, flickered and died, plunging them back into darkness. But they didn't need light anymore. The path back was etched into their minds, every twist and turn imprinted by fear. They ran blindly, their lungs burning, their legs screaming in protest. The grinding noise grew louder, the vibration shaking the very ground they ran on. Just when their hope began to dwindle, they saw at the faint outline of the tunnel entrance, a gateway to safety. With a final burst of energy, they stumbled out of the darkness and into the relative safety of the service tunnel. They collapsed onto the damp floor, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. The silence, broken only by the dripping water and their ragged breathing, was deafening. After a moment to gather their wits, they slowly made their way back to the main tunnel, their steps cautious and hesitant. The familiar surroundings were a balm to their frayed nerves, a reminder of the world they had almost left behind. They emerged from the service tunnel, blinking in the harsh fluorescent lights of the main tunnel. The noise and bustle of the metro station washed over them, a cacophony of sound that was almost overwhelming after the oppressive silence of the condemned tunnel. Their colleagues, alerted by the power outage, rushed to greet them, their faces etched with concern. Ivan and Dmitri recounted their harrowing experience, their voices still shaky with the remnants of fear. The news of their near-death experience spread quickly, a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that lurked beneath the city. The condemned tunnel was sealed permanently, its entrance marked with a stark warning. Ivan and Dmitri returned to their duties, forever bonded by their shared experience. The memory of the crumbling depths, the grinding of concrete, and the oppressive darkness would stay with them forever, a chilling reminder of their brush with death and the fragility of life. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy for Ivan and Dmitri. They continued their work in the metro, their camaraderie deepened by their shared ordeal. Yet the experience in the condemned tunnel left an indelible mark on their psyches. Every creak and groan of the metro system, every flicker of the lights sent shivers down their spines, triggering flashbacks of their harrowing escape. Dmitri, once eager and curious, became withdrawn and introspective. The darkness held a new terror for him, and he often found himself struggling to sleep, haunted by nightmares of collapsing tunnels and the suffocating silence of the abandoned depths. Ivan, though outwardly stoic, was also deeply affected. He felt a heavy burden of responsibility for leading Dmitri into danger, and the memory of their near-death experience weighed heavily on his conscience. One day, while on a routine inspection, they found themselves once again in the service tunnel where their ordeal had begun. The air hung heavy with the familiar scent of damp earth and rust, and the shadows seemed to dance with malevolent intent. Dmitri froze, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. "I can't," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I can't go back there." Ivan placed a reassuring hand on Dmitri's shoulder. "We don't have to," he said gently. "We'll inform the supervisor. They can send someone else." As they turned to leave, a low grinding sound echoed through the tunnel. They froze, their blood turning to ice. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was unmistakable. It was the sound of shifting concrete, the sound of a collapsing tunnel. They exchanged a look of horror, their eyes reflecting the same chilling realization. The condemned tunnel, the source of their nightmares, was not as silent as they had thought. The collapse they had narrowly escaped was not a singular event, but an ongoing process. The depths were still crumbling, and the echoes of their past continued to haunt them.